All right, what is going on, everyone? I decided this would just be an easier way to go about this update than trying to film something, edit it, release it, all that kind of stuff. So, we got an update late last night, or at least that's when some people started seeing it. And so I had some people message me on Instagram, and I had seen that Mickey over at Swaggle Comics put out a short video about it. But there was an even bigger update that came out about maybe 2 hours ago, and it was on that same Twitter, formerly known as X account from Paul Lesko. And it's actually the details of this, the original scam, not the new one, so we have the scam that we got the update on recently, which was this new court case that nobody knew about, which was the employees that were working at CGC, and they were stealing books and resubmitting them and selling them on eBay and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, you had that one going on. Then last night, and it apparently was filed on February 2nd, so we probably could have found it earlier, but it just people started finding this late last night and kind of sharing it around. This is, as Mickey refers to it as, the Mark Jeweler Fooler. This is that case. So it is officially out there now. The names are public. It's got the details, everything. And so that's this, Ulysses Zanello and Bree Riva. And if that Bree Riva sounds familiar, it's because one of the eBay accounts that those scam books that were known to be sold under was B Riva 3. And so now you go, okay, that's the tie there. And so yeah, so there's definitely, there's that whole link there. And for the people that have been like screaming about names and everything, it's like, I mean, honestly, like, what are you going to do? But these are the names. They're officially public out there. This is and yes, Flexopotamus. This is that new court case against the OG scammers that just dropped. That is correct. So now this is what Mickey went over in his video that he put out like really late last night, like 4 or 5 in the morning Eastern time, something like that. And this just goes over kind of like the filing of this, the request for summons, request for appearances, all that kind of thing. But if we go over to to X, and we go to Paul Lesko's account here. He says here, this has been a busy week for CGC, who also sued 2 of its former employees last week. And that's what we were talking about, before. That was the video that had just come out. That was the Brandon and Ayana Terrazas. That was the whole, like, in the inside job situation. But now if we go down here, and I haven't looked through this in detail yet. That's why I thought this would be interesting, just to kind of like go through this live with everyone. I've got a little bit of information from looking at it quickly, but not much. And so we'll kind of just go through this together, check out what's going on with this, because it's Sunday. It's I got a lot of stuff to do. You can't turn down the opportunity to talk about this, because this has been one of the more interesting things that's been going on in the comic community in the last, like 5 years. So we got the lawsuit here. CGC is taking on Ulysses Zanello and Bree Riva, who allegedly engaged in what they advertised as CGC certified comic books in CGC holders, but in reality were swapped for inferior, lower value comics. So we got the details here. Defendants aware of the significant goodwill associated with CGC's name. This is very similar language that we saw in the other one. Like, basically, it's like, this is all about the damage that these people did to CGC's reputation. Because now, obviously, everybody out there that's what everyone's talking about. It's like, should I submit books? Should I wait? Do I need to wait till they come up with a new case? Like, all the expense that's going to go into them probably eventually coming up with a new case, all this kind of stuff. And at least from what I've heard, that other lawsuit was going to be for something like $2 million. This one, I get the impression this one's going to be worse. I don't know for sure. I don't know if that gets talked about in here at all. But like you saw in the thumbnail, this is addressing at least $4 million in comics. That is what they're saying were submitted. Now, I don't know how they're evaluating that, if they revalued everything, if it's based on the value the person put into the CGC system when they submitted the books, or what. But it was over 2,000 comics total that were submitted, and $4 million approximately in value. And for this question right here, wait, this is another lawsuit? Yes, it is. But this is the one that we were all really looking for. This is the one that I think everybody was more interested in. Like, the whole inside job one was a big surprise. Nobody was expecting that, other than the people, with the, get my tinfoil hat here. The people with the tinfoil hats that were all just like, this is always an inside job, that kind of stuff. But no, other than, other than those people, nobody was really expecting the inside job lawsuit. This is the one that has to go with the, the Mark Jeweler fooler, the one where that the 99 newsstand found in kind of like late December that just blew up everything on this story. And this is the actual lawsuit now for that. So what it says here is, as we were saying, defendants are aware of the significant goodwill associated with CGC's name and brand, have engaged and are continuing to engage in a fraudulent scheme whereby they offer for sale what appears to be and what they advertise and market as CGC certified comic books in CGC branded sealed holders. In reality, however, defendants are swapping the CGC certified comic books with inferior, lower value comic books, and in many cases submitting them to CGC to be purportedly reholdered in a CGC branded holder. As a result, consumers believe they are receiving legitimate comic books certified by CGC and agree to pay a commensurate price, but they're actually receiving a swapped comic book resealed in a CGC holder with false grading information. So this is everything, right? Like this is what we've all been talking about, like the swapped in books. And this is that 350 book list, basically, that CGC had put on their site. Actually goes into a little more detail down in here. They actually mentioned 369 books that were submitted for reholder, but 2,000 total books that were submitted. So that obviously brings into question, like, are the reholder books the only ones that are in question, or are there any of that 2,000, like the other part of that 2,000 books that are in question? And it seems like the focus CGC was on the reholder side. So I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I don't have any details about that. And Neo says he has the full document if I want it. Eventually that might be interesting to see and actually read through. I appreciate that. And then let's see. We've got, I just want to make sure I keep up with comments. Yeah. Simpson yelling at the clouds. One of my favorite memes that's out there. Old man yells at clouds. But now we go down into the eBay accounts. And this actually has some other accounts that I hadn't heard before. So this gives everybody an idea of what accounts these were all being sold under. So if you have ever bought books under these accounts, just something to be aware of, or bought books from these accounts. Zanello and Riva operated on this reholdering scam through a number of eBay accounts, including Corner 142, Elysium 142, Zanglor, Orleg, Comic Selects, and Briva 3. The Comic Selects is the one that the books were found on. That was the one where those Mark Jeweler books were being sold under. Briva 3 was the one that people were often seeing that was a past account that was being used. And that's where I said the Bri Riva, the name of one of the people, is actually in that account. My God, like, again, the last scammer, like, they're selling under accounts with their actual names in it. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're breaking the law, and then you're selling with an account with your actual name in it. Like, come on. But upon information and belief, Zanello owns and or controls. Okay. Oh yeah. And then we go, upon information and belief, defendant Bri Riva is an individual residing in New York and transacts business worldwide, including in New York. Then we have Riva owns and controls eBay accounts, Comic Selects, and Riva 3. So that's those two. Let's see. I'm just checking back in the comments here. I had a plan to submit a ton of early ASM this year, but it looks like I might be waiting if CGC can't live up to the G in their name. Yeah, and I've said that too. I'm on hold right now on submitting books, and that was kind of like my speculation as to why CGC dropped prices, is maybe other people are doing that too. And this is why these lawsuits are out there, because it really did. I mean, this hurts their reputation. People then wonder about what's being submitted. They wonder if there's going to be a new case. They don't want to have to resubmit after that. And I'm sure it's hurting their submissions, and they want this to stop. We got 12-cent comics here. What's up, Automatic? CGC has to keep track of those serial numbers. Yeah, for sure. And if you haven't watched my, I had a nice little rant in my video that I posted today about serial numbers. And so I recommend going checking that one out. I had a video that actually posted like right before this, but decided to go live regardless. And then we've got the question, why don't we just switch to CBCS and forget CGC? So, I mean, I will be completely honest here. And I responded to somebody in a comment recently as well about this. It's because CGC books sell for more. I mean, I sell enough books. I watch enough auctions, watch enough sales. I know CGC books sell for more. Don't come at me and say like, oh, I want proof they don't actually sell for more. They do. They sell for more. And even when they sell for the same amount, usually what happens is somebody has to keep the book listed for 5 times as long. I know this. I have CBCS books that will not sell, and I have priced them under CGC sales. It's just, it just is what it is. The CGC books sell for more. And if you are somebody that is doing this partly, at least as a business, like me, I do collect books. I'm a collector, but I am also a business. I am a comic reseller. And so value matters. And it's not my job to get CBCS to get their books to sell for the same value. CBCS has got to do the work. They've got to be advertising. They've got to take advantage of situations when CGC drops the ball, but they never do. Lots of people have talked about this, how like the whole CGC scam thing, CBCS post made one Instagram post, and it was like 4 weeks later, they made another one. Like, come on, like if you want your books to actually sell for as much as the competition, to actually be a competition for the, the big dog that's out there, you've got to take advantage of the situations, and they've failed. They have failed to do that. And yeah, I mean, that's my little thing. I mean, that's why, like, a huge part of it is money. A smaller part of it is, things like presentation. Like everybody's saying like, oh, and the label changes, they'll switch to CBCS. Nobody did. The label changed. Nobody cared. So it's like, it's money. Like, we know it's money, and CGC books sell for more. That's my rant. So for anybody that wants to keep telling me to switch to CBCS, I'm not going to, unless CBCS sells for more or the same. I mean, yeah, sure, then, but not going to if they sell for less. It's not my job to eat that loss for CBCS. But yeah, that's my rant there. Then we've got, wouldn't something like this turn the tide on sales prices? And I'll tell you, no. I mean, I've talked about this too. Like, we've had these, I mean, I watch these auctions every week. I watch all of them, and CGC books, they're still killing it, hitting new records in some books, holding prices strong in other books. Like, it has not impacted sales. I haven't noticed any impact in sales. And so it hasn't mattered, and I think part of it is like a lot of the people who are like screaming out there, they're the people who are never slabbers, people who don't buy graded books and who don't submit books to get graded. So even though you can be loud about something, your opinion doesn't actually influence anything, because you aren't actually out there buying at all. It only, like, the people whose opinions end up really mattering are the buyers of CGC books, the people who actually submit CGC books. And as long as they're still buying CGC and still submitting CGC, doesn't matter, and like, I'm just, that's the way it is. I mean, I know people don't want to hear that, but I mean, that's just the truth. And yeah, Neo Comics and Cards, CBCS is not capable to take advantage of it. That's the problem. And that's the other thing. Like, if we all remember when CGC raised their prices in like the middle of the pandemic and everybody lost their minds, like, so many people were like, I'm going to CBCS, I'm never coming back. And a few people went to CBCS, but almost all of them came back. You see them submitting CGC books now today. They started at CBCS and they came back because I think a lot of them probably saw, oh yeah, they do actually sell for more at CGC. But the other big part of it was, I don't think CBCS could handle the load. Like, they handle a tiny fraction of what CGC does. So if they had to actually handle the entire load of CGC, or even a significant portion of it, they would just get crushed, and then their backlog would be a year, and then everybody would hate CBCS again. So I mean, it's just like, these companies, they can't turn on a dime. And I think a lot of people think that they can maybe turn on a dime, hire all the new people they need, make a new case instantly. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. And then Dan T says, as a collector, I take advantage of getting cheaper books from CBCS, and I like the cases. Yeah, and that's fine. That's what you can do, but that's all the point, right? Like, as a dealer, like, why would you want to send your book to CBCS so somebody else can get it from you for cheaper? Like, I mean, that is the problem, right? Did CGC list of the books affected by the inside worker scam? I have not heard that. No, they haven't. All right. So before I come back to comments again, let's go back to this. Let's talk. This is why we're here. Let's see what else is going on here. Now, this was one of the other things on my thumbnail. And so what did the defendants allegedly do? CGC alleges Zanello and Riva submitted 2,000 plus comic books to CGC under Zanello's account and through a dealer account for Comic Book Station. Now that I believe is a shop. So just that was another one that I know people like. It had been floating around out there in the ether. But Comic Book Station / Comic Book Underground that Zanello improperly got permission to use from the account owner. So let's look into the actual details here. So defendants initially made all submissions to CGC under Zanello's account beginning around February 16th or February 2016. Defendants also made submissions under a dealer account, Comic Book Station. Upon information and belief, the CBS account is controlled by an individual named Tommy Chabrowski, who in or around 2016 granted defendants permission to access and use the CBS account in violation of CGC's terms of website use so that defendants could make submissions to CGC at discounted rates applicable to dealer accounts. Over the years, defendants have submitted more than 2,000 comic books. Approximately 369 were for reholdering. So that's where that around 350 books came from, because that's where a lot of the question is, around the reholdered books, the ones that were swapped in and then sent back in for reholdering. But it means there are still, there are 2,000 out there that, now granted, I think a lot of people have said like a lot of those books may be legitimate. So a lot of that other, part of the 2,000 may be legitimate books, no issue. But 369 of them, that 350 list, basically, maybe not, and not necessarily every reholder submission is illegitimate too, all that kind of stuff. But it says the defendant submissions have increased in recent years, with 253 in 2021, 345 in 2022, and 329 in 2023. So out of those 2,000 submissions, that is 700. It's about 900. A little more than 900 of them, 930, something like that. So a pretty good percentage of them within the last few years. Then it says, upon receiving defendant submissions, whether under Zanello's account or the CBS account, CGC certified and or reholdered comic books in the ordinary course as requested and then return them to the defendants. The declared aggregate value. And so, okay, so that's what it was. So they had, when you submit to CGC, you put in a value for the books. And that's what this is saying. The declared aggregate value is nearly 4 million, which that means the actual value could be quite a bit higher than that. A lot of times people don't put in the full value for the book, and so that actual value could actually be more than $4 million. Now that's for 2,000. That's not for 369. But oh yeah, and here it says the market value of the comic book often exceeds the value declared by the submitter. All right, they got it right there. So this could definitely be more than $4 million. And then here's when, this is when 99 Newsstand broke this whole thing open. We go on or about December 21st, 2023, CGC discovered that defendants are engaged in fraudulent swapping scheme where obtained CGC certified comic books, open or otherwise tamper with the sealed CGC holder, swap the CGC certified book out for an inferior, lower value copy of the same or similar comic book, submit the inferior, lower value comic to CGC for reholdering and grading. And then upon receipt of the reholdered comic book from CGC, offer for sell, advertise, distribute the lower value book in the fresh CGC holder. So that's what that's the whole thing that we all know about. And they've got examples down here. So they've got some examples of books that had been swapped out. Yeah, like here, you can see it was this is like that X-Men 266 that I had found, where it was a direct edition and it magically turned into a newsstand. You got that example here with the Hulk 340. Then here's the, is this, oh no, this isn't even the notorious 9.8. This is another 9.8 of ASM 252, but the one that caused all the uproar was the Mark Jeweler. And you can tell this is not that, that Mark Jeweler's insert, but here we go. So, this is where, then we've got Paul Lesko is talking about all of these different ones, 2,000 submissions, 369 for reholdering, the aggregate value being $4 million. When they discovered this, basically when 99 Newsstand, found out about this and, how this whole process worked. Yeah. It's just, it's crazy actually seeing it out there now. Here, let's go back up to the contents. So we've got, a plaintiff's attorney and comic collector, you need to hear what I have to say about what CGC must do to get this fairly resolved or face class action lawsuit. Yeah, I mean, if that's the type of thing that you have information on, I mean, obviously, I'm not an attorney. I'm just reading what an attorney says. But yeah, that's the type of information that people want to have given to them. I mean, now, right now, a lot of people are obviously just, I think, following through with the resubmission process, getting their books, getting the money for their books, all that kind of thing. But yeah, who knows? Who knows if a class action lawsuit would ultimately be coming? But that's the question. It's like, do you want to wait to get your money back, or you just want to get it handled right away? I mean, I don't know. I'd probably just want to get it handled right away, but that's me. So we've got Flexponymous. You touched on it earlier, but don't we have to hold off on submitting until a new case is released? If the old case is obsolete, wouldn't we have to record any new and maybe old submissions? You don't have to hold off on anything. I mean, people are still submitting books all the time. Like I said, I had a book that was going in already. I had my Superman 2 that was already in the process. There's nothing that stops you from submitting books. And like I said, I think that a new case is probably a long ways off. I mean, I'd love to hear what CGC has to say about that. Like if they have a new case plan, but I talked about that in one of my recent videos, that I felt like maybe this drop in price was because they aren't going to be giving us a new case anytime soon. Because again, that is not something that you can turn on a dime. Like everybody, that I've talked to that's been back in comics a lot longer than me, that's talked about the different iterations of the CGC cases, they say it's years between them. Like this is not something where you can just go like, oh, let's change the case and then tomorrow you have a new case. This has been one of my big sticking points with the whole like releasing the information and how to get into the case, is that puts everybody at risk, because this is not going to be fixed overnight. It could be, I don't know, a year from now, 2 years from now. And it's the way it's probably going to be. Like big companies like this don't turn on a dime. And these cases require like machinery. They require a lot of design and iterations and that kind of thing. They want to make sure like whatever they put out there isn't immediately susceptible again. You don't want to rush that either. Let's see. Then we've got one company has a compromised case and employees stealing books. The other company is sending books home with graders and losing them. I haven't heard of PGX controversy in a while. Yeah. I mean, like that's one of the other things I kind of joke about too, is that there isn't any company out there that's perfect, not just in comics. It's like every company that's out there. Like there's always going to be scammers out there. There's always going to be flaws out there, all this kind of stuff. It's all about how companies respond to those situations. So that's what we want to see. We want to see how CGC responds. And I mean, somewhat CGC has responded relatively well. Like they put out the list, they're taking care of people financially, supposedly. I haven't officially heard about that from anyone. But the other side of it is, it's like I said, I feel like, we didn't get real straight answers in that interview. It would have been a little, I just like things are still being hidden from us. And I get it. Like there's lawsuits, there's all this, like this is millions of dollars. But it still feels like we're not getting like as much information as I feel like most of us would really like to have. And then we've got Manny says, damn, I bought comic books from Comic Book Station. Mickey saying, yeah, we're doomed. Yeah, I know. Like we were joking about this before the chat. We're like, yep, every book that's in a slab now is fake. None of them are real. This kind of stuff, and that's just something else. Like I just kind of like, I want to comment on, like all the, like the doom and gloom stuff, where it's like, oh, your books are worthless now. And it's like, it's still the comic book, like that whole idea, like I was just saying, like from like the never slabbers, where it's like that they think that we, like somebody who likes to slab books, like thinks the value is in the case. The value isn't in the case. The value is in the comic. The case just helps reduce conflict when you're selling the book. It tells you, ideally, outside of obviously scammer situations, like approximately what the grade is. And you can disagree a little bit, but you're within range. And that's what like Steve Borak said when he was on Mickey's channel too. It's like, you may disagree on a 6.0 or a 6.5 or a 5.5, but it gets you in the ballpark so that you can at least agree that it's about this. It also helps you know if there's restoration, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's the, I think that like just that whole thing where it's just like this like tribalism that's out there, where it's like just the hatred that you see when people are like, I mean, as someone who receives this, like on the YouTube side of things, like sees this in the comments, receives these comments, like just the hatred that goes into, just like comic books. It's like, geez, it's like they're supposed to be fun, right? Like who cares if it's in a piece of plastic or not? Who cares if I don't want to read that book? I just want it on my shelf. But it's like you're committing like a war crime, if you want to have a book in plastic that you can crack out anytime you want if you actually want to read it. It's not locked in there perfectly, or not locked in there permanently. And we got, Swag. Hope your Sunday morning is going well. Yeah, no, we'll see how said you're going to a show, so that'll be cool. Could be lower too. Always put max value when submitting, or you always put max value when submitting. If something happens to the whole order, it would provide some leverage to all the books. Yeah, I mean, I think that goes with like if you're submitting within a tier, like if you're submitting in the vintage tier, you just put 400 in. But you don't want to put 800 in, or like if you think it's like a $500 book, you're probably going to put it at 400, because you put it at 500, now you got to pay the high value tier. So it's just, that's the whole little game that everybody plays when they're submitting. Okay, the defendants were wrong in what they did, but why didn't CGC discover this sooner? They too are at fault. So that's one of those things. Like I also think about this, I do think about that. Like, what is CGC's responsibility in all of this? Like, what are they responsible to find? And, this is something where, yes, they should have some type of, I would call it like machine learning, that goes on in the background. That's evaluating people's submissions. That's evaluating what's coming in and what's going out, to look for outliers, to look for red flags. And it doesn't necessarily mean that what it identifies is a red flag, that person instantly is banned, that they're instantly doing something wrong. But at least it tells you, it's like, something's weird with this submitter. Let's go check that one out. And you just follow up on it, or you keep a close eye on the books that they send in. But they obviously they didn't do that, because 99 Newsstand found it. It's just like collectors looking through things found it. And so, yes, I agree. There is responsibility on CGC's side, which is also, I think, probably why they're paying people. They're refunding them for their books. They're allowing them to replace their books. But it's also like, I mean, you're going to have bad actors. And so there's always going to be people that, like, what is the saying? It's like, you need to build a better mousetrap. Like, there's somebody that's going to make it through that mousetrap. You need to build a better mousetrap, like that kind of stuff. But yeah. So, and then with the people who were stealing books internally, I mean, I was ranting to my wife about this when I saw that, where I was just like, how does that even happen? Like, how does somebody even walk up to like a shelf and clear, like, from what that person had, like, pull a Hulk 1 off a shelf? Like, why do they have access to that? Why aren't there cameras everywhere? Like, why can anybody ever bring books in or out of CGC? You should, if you're an employee, you should never be able to bring any collectible that CGC grades in or out. Not cards, not comics, movies, video games, any of that stuff. It should all be, locked down. Like, they check your bags, all this kind of stuff, because you're dealing with many millions of dollars of people's property. And so, yes, those types of things, like, they should have better systems in place. Hopefully, and this is what you want to have happen, hopefully what comes of this is they put better systems in place. They put better checks in place to make sure that these kinds of things don't happen. But the idea of just like blanket, like saying like, oh, never going to use them again, they're done, this kind of stuff. Like, I don't buy into that. I think that I've said it before. I think CGC provides a valuable service. Especially like as someone, when I first got back into comics about 5 years ago, I was buying raw books on eBay and I was getting screwed by people because I was trusting what people said on their eBay listings. I didn't really know how to grade. I had like a very rough idea, and I didn't really know how to grade. I didn't really know the things to look for. Like, I wasn't familiar with stuff like tanning and how that impacts the grade, and like how much like a stain can impact things, and how much foxing, or even what foxing was at that point. Like all that kind of stuff that these guys who are like never slabbers, that they're like, you should know all this if you're buying a comic. It's like you're putting up this huge wall for people to get into the hobby. Like that is one of the things that grading does. It takes down that wall. It makes it so it's easier that you don't have to have 5, 10, 50 years of experience to be able to do this stuff. Like that's one of the big pluses of grading. It's like it takes down that wall for entry. The barrier to entry, you get smaller. And so I mean, I know there are people that just like, they hate it and they want you to, it's like, I call them, they're the gatekeepers. They're these people who are gatekeepers that they don't want prices to go up. They don't want new people in their hobby, blah, blah, blah. They don't want people that just collect slabs because then they can't read it. I mean, you do what you want to do, but don't pressure people, to do what they want to do with their own money with the hobby. But that's my, again, like a few little rants in here that I've, they've been circling around my mind for a while because I get so many like negative, hate-filled comments on these, on these videos that I just think people need to be able to see it from another perspective. And that's something that's very difficult for people to do, is look at it from another perspective. Like if you've been in the hobby for 30 years, 40 years, try looking at it from someone who's just trying to get in, or maybe they were in it 20 years ago and they're just coming back. It's like just have a little bit of grace for people, out there. But we've got, I guess it all depends on the, I think that's the wrong word, but the people basically say the people you sell to. I know dealers with no problem selling CBCS for the same as CGC. I mean, I'll tell you, like I've watched enough Instagram live claim sales, seeing people with CBCS books just sit. Nobody wants them. Now, I know people say they can sell them for the same, but are they sitting on their shelf for the same amount of time? That's the question. Because yeah, I've sold CBCS books and I've gotten those numbers, but it took me, like I think I said earlier in the chat, like 5 times as long to sell the book. So it's not just the dollar value. That's why whenever people ask for examples, I always use the examples in an auction when the same book sells back to back in the same grade, same page quality, CGC, CBCS. Every single time CGC sells for more. Every time. And that is the true measure of what the demand is for that book. Whether that, that CBCS, like, I mean, like, and often you see the CBCS one that sold for less, like try to get sold later. Somebody bought it and they're trying to sell it for the CGC price and it usually sits. I saw it happen with that 9.8 giant size X-Men one. It popped up on Instagram trying to ask the price of the CGC and it just sat there. So, I mean, I watch enough sales to know how this stuff actually works. But yeah. Got Neo. CGC could make small changes to the case and never announce it. They could, but I think they would probably want to announce it. The thing that I would have thought, like, and I know a number of people have brought this up. This was one of the first things I thought of when I heard of this, was that they would do something simple, like a hollow sticker along the edge, and it doesn't have to be the full edge. It doesn't have to be like really visually like obtrusive, it could be like just like a small one. You have to make sure it can't be just removed with a heat gun, like it can't just be removed with a little solvent. Like you got to do something, you got to try different things out, see how you make it work. But like that's something where it wouldn't even have to be part of the actual case. It'd be a process immediately after it's slabbed. You wouldn't have to change anything except maybe hire a couple new people to just put these stickers on the edges and then have that as just another deterrent, something that makes it just a little bit more difficult to do this. Cause that's what it's all about. Like when you see like videos of people going like checking car doors and that kind of stuff, it's all about how easy it is to commit the crime. Right. And right now it's been shown that the crime is relatively easy to commit. So you just got to make it a little bit harder, and that's one of those like first steps, an interim step that could be done. And I haven't heard anything like that. And that would have been one of the really nice things to hear. Like, again, like when Matt Nelson was on West Coast Avengers channel, you're like, oh yeah, we have some ideas in place that we're thinking of implementing, real soon, or this kind of thing. Like, but it was just like nothing, like nothing. All right. Let's see. I want to catch up. I've fallen behind during my rant sessions here. As a presser, I can tell you it's much easier to cleanly break a CGC case than a CBCS. I don't think there's a perfect solution for this though. And that's what, again, like what Mickey, when he had, Steve Borak on his channel, it's not about it being like a safe, that you can't break into. It's about it being tamper evident, that you can tell someone did something, like someone screwed with this case. And yeah, from what we've seen, like CBCS cases are better for that. They are much more tamper evident than CGC. Whether it's like it sounds like they have like maybe a slightly lower melting point in the plastic, so they kind of like, I mean, they show melting. If you try to use like the heat gun method, they seem like they're more stiff, so maybe they crack a little easier. All that kind of stuff. Then Neo says, if only there was another large company that is an industry leader but does not currently grade comics. I mean, with cards, I'm sure I'm sure there are plenty of options that are out there. Now, my understanding, it seems like one of the big limiters on comics is the machinery for slabbing. That does, from what I've heard, and I'm not an expert on this stuff, but from what I've heard, that is one of the big limiters. Whereas with cards, I mean, like I know guys that have like they're just like a YouTube channel and they do pack openings and they have their own card grading in their office. Like they have something like where like they'll grade the card there for you. Like they'll crack it out or they'll do the pack opening. It's like, oh, you hit the card that you want. They'll just walk into the back room. They'll grade the card. They'll come out 5 minutes later with a graded card. It seems like it's maybe a lot lower barrier of entry to get into card grading than it is to comic grading. But also, I mean, the big part of it is it's those sales numbers, right? Like, I mean, I talked about that earlier. It's the sales numbers. And do people really want to send their books in somewhere else where they're going to get a lot less money for it? I mean, yeah, maybe you save $5 on grading. It's like $5 or $10 cheaper on grading. But if you lose $500 when you sell the book, what does it matter? Right? Like you're not going to use them. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like I'm not trying to ever say like, oh, I think CBCS should just go away. Like competition is good. We want competition out there. You want multiple companies out there that provide this service that people equally like to use, but that just doesn't exist in comics right now. And CGC has been around for so long and they have such a high moat. And by moat, it's not like it's their process or anything. It's the volume of comics that are out there. It's the volume that they process every day. Like that's their moat. And that is very, very difficult to get over. Like if you watch any given auction, you'll see like out of 1,000 books, maybe you'll see, 100 raws, 880 CGC and 20 CBCS. And that's probably high on the CBCS. It's probably more like 5. So that's the big moat there. Is there any indication that they'll drop a full list of certs? Not that I've heard. I think we'll just have to leave that to CGC. I mean, and I talked about that when this whole thing first broke with the 350 books, because we knew there were books that they had processed, like that they had sent in that were not on that list. Because when you looked at their submission records, like you can, when you look at a CGC serial number, you can just go up 1, down 1, that kind of thing. And you can see different books. And we know that not all the books were on there. And so we all hypothesized that they were just doing the reholders. Like those were the ones that they were counting. But like, if it was me, I probably would have been safe and just had checked all 2,000. That's what I would have done. I feel like that would have been better on the goodwill side of things. But I mean, that's obviously more money. I don't know. Like that's probably how I would have done it. Always good to take a pic of any telltale flaws in your book before submitting, especially high-end books. Yeah, like that's one of those things where it helps, like for me, because I film everything. Like I usually have a pretty good idea what the book looks like. But yes, yeah. I mean, especially if you're doing smaller submissions, it's a little easier. If you're doing big submissions, it can be pretty, I don't know, time consuming, and you always worry you're going to damage the book. But yeah, it's never a bad idea to have something. It doesn't mean it's going to help you, down the line if something doesn't match. But it's not a bad idea. The CGC case was defective under the law, very clear, and CGC was negligent allowing those cases to be used more than reholder issue. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I feel like that's something for the lawyers to all decide. But it's all about what right? Like if there's a problem or not. And I think everybody speculate. Like I responded to a comment earlier this week, similar to this, where someone had said that, like, oh, like some guy on YouTube was able to break into their case. Like if they didn't know about it, they're idiots. Like how could they not know this or how to do this? And it's like some guys on YouTube, just because you're on YouTube doesn't mean you're some moron. you know, like like there's a lot of like, especially in the comic world, like there's a lot of us that are very technical, like we have very technical backgrounds. And just because you're on YouTube doesn't mean you don't have like serious like engineering or technical degree that you can apply to this. And it's also one of those things where people don't always look for problems until there's actually like a problem, right? And so it's like once people saw that there was a flaw with the books, like how did this book get into this other case? People want to dig. It is a mystery to solve. And so you have people starting to dig and figure it out. And then once someone shows you like how to do it, it's like, oh, it's so easy. But why didn't anybody make a video about that 5 years ago? Right? Like, why didn't like you have people that'll go like, oh, I know this happens. And it's like, but they didn't make a video about it. They didn't show anybody. They didn't talk about it. And it's because they probably didn't actually know how to do it. But it's the whole like once somebody shows you, it's like, see, I told you so. It's that whole mindset. And it's like, it's not just because someone shows you it's easy doesn't mean it was actually easy to figure out in the first place. It's like, it's the whole, build a better mousetrap, that kind of thing. It's the, it was the mystery that needed to be solved. And no, I have no desire to make a grading company and deal with this type of blowback. So it's not on my radar, but appreciate it. And yeah, hey, internet guy, $2 super chat. Thanks a lot. Love the drama and CGC stepping up. Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. It's like, how do they respond? Again, I really do hope that we don't have to wait like a year for a solution. I don't like that idea. I hope they can come up with at least like an interim solution before a new case. I feel like that could be done and it wouldn't cost a ton. But that's, we'll see. We got Swaggle House. All companies are at risk of fraud, but with these two lawsuits, it seems CGC Security got real soft. Now that's the other thing. I've kind of wondered this, and I don't know. This is all this whole speculation stuff where I feel like, CGC and CBCS, like these different companies or branches of those companies were started by guys who were like big comic collectors, like big comic nerds, that kind of stuff. And while I really like having those people in leadership positions at these companies, because I think it is good for us, good for collectors, good for dealers, good for comics to have somebody that's not just solely set on money at the head. I think that's good, but I feel like there are maybe some positions missing at these companies. And that's the people who would identify these types of gaps, because it really does seem like these types of things should be planned for. You should have people that their job, like all their job is to figure out how people can steal from your company. Whether that's inside jobs, whether that's stealing from you by hurting your brand, by breaking into the cases and people not finding out about it. Like there should be people at that company, and maybe there are, but maybe they're not funded well enough, or there aren't enough of them, or the team isn't big enough. Hopefully the team's bigger after this. But, like Dave at Comic Book Investments, like when he talked to the guys from CBCS, he had mentioned an idea of, what did he say? Like putting out like a bounty on their cases, where it's like, you try to break into our case and then show us how you did it, and then we'll improve our case to make it better. And they were against that. And I'm like, why? Like, that's a very good idea. That's literally what big software companies do. Like Google, Apple, like they pay people thousands of dollars to break into their systems because they want a good person that's not going to screw them to find the flaw and then tell them about it so that they can fix it. Like that's what you should be doing. Like that is a fantastic idea. That is putting these ideas that these other like major companies use, and so like when CGC is coming up with a new case, because they will eventually, like that's what they should be doing. Reach out to the people that showed they could break into these cases and say, like, here's our current iteration. Try to break into this. And if you do, tell us how you do it. And make them sign something so they don't put a YouTube video out about it, and then they send it back to them and they try again and they try again. You try again until you get a product that is very, very difficult to break into in a way that people can't tell. Like that's the type of thing that should be going on there. Those are the people that should have positions for that. And maybe, like I said, maybe they do, but either they haven't been doing what they're supposed to, or they aren't funded well enough, or whatever. Because I feel like there's just, it's like, like I feel like a lot of us, we're just like we're trusting, like you trust people. You're like, oh, I wouldn't do this, so why would somebody else do this? Like I would never steal from from CGC if I was grading there, but like you got to think like there's somebody out there that probably would. How do we prevent that person if we accidentally hire someone that's a thief? How do we make it so that they can't hurt us? Those are the types of things that they should be thinking about. And hopefully they are now, but yeah, that's where, yeah, I agree with that. Like they need to either put a team together to start, with that as their focus, or put more money into a team if it already exists. And Collecto6, Steven, yeah, appreciate it. A $5 super chat. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. And thanks thanks everybody for joining. Got 93 people in the chat. Really appreciate it. Again, like I said, I thought this would be just better to do it in a live stream and then trying to film something. And then I can also get a few things off my chest that, that I've been thinking about for a while. So you can hear the variety of rants. I thought about making a video where it was just like, this is what I really think. But this is pretty much that video. So yeah. Then we got Brandon says, bad guys were hired during the time CGC severely needed workers. I remember front page of CGC had shipping receiving page for hiring, same time period. But also, I mean, at least from what we heard, like the two that were stealing, like they were there for a year before they decided to do it. I mean, it's just, like some people, they get tempted. You're surrounded by, I mean, if you're grading expensive books and it's like, I don't know what CGC pays. I have no idea, but like, it's like, say you're getting paid like, I don't know, like $30 an hour or something. And, if you're over the course of a year, that's like 60 grand, but every day you have $500,000 in comics pass through your hands. Like, like some people are going to be tempted by that. And so you need to have the processes in place so that if somebody is tempted by that they can't actually do anything, or if they do, they get caught immediately. Now, at least that one, they caught them pretty quick. It was like May to September. But it's still, that's a pretty long time where books are getting stolen and things just disappearing. Prince of Cheese, let's just hold off on any more CGC value depressing news until after I get my Tech 73 back. Tech 73 sold, please. Thank you. Yeah. Congratulations on your pickup, Prince of Cheese. If you don't follow him on Instagram, I bought a few books from him over time on Instagram. He's always got cool books for sale. And he just picked up Detective Comics 73. So, all right. We've got how many resubmits through though before you're like, I think in 20 years I've done less than 6. But that's the thing. Like if you don't have a process in place that's actually doing the data analytics, like these are just books coming in. Like you don't know who that's coming from. Like every submission is under a new serial number. Like you don't know who's doing those as the person evaluating the book, as the person cracking the book out and putting it into the new case. But CGC knows who it is, and they would need to have some type of data analytics in place, some type of machine learning, that kind of thing, where it's evaluating those and looking for those outliers. And again, hopefully they do now, but clearly they did not before. Let's just say they do come out with a new case. Wouldn't that make all the old cases irrelevant? I mean, not really. I mean, like I said, we've had these cases that are the books in current cases that are selling right now that are selling for as much and more. And you've got really old cases, which have been known to be pretty susceptible for a long time, like the old label cases. And people pay a huge premium for the old label cases because the likelihood of being able to crack it out and get a higher grade. So I honestly, like, I don't think it's going to have that big of an impact. I mean, maybe it will, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it will. Then we've got, I'm honestly not surprised things were being stolen out of CGC. You have that in every company. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's what controls do you put in place to limit that? Curious as to the policies of CGC. Were these systems in place and just ignored? They need third-party assessments on a regular basis. again, I don't know. I don't work at CGC, so I don't know what policies they have in place to prevent this kind of stuff. But like, if I was setting something up like that, I would have everything very compartmentalized. You know, like the graders, the slabbers, the shippers, all this kind of stuff. Like, grader can't go and pull books off shelves. You know, like maybe somebody's like bringing them to them and dropping them off. You know, like they have no clue who this book is tied to. Now, I know some people, like sometimes you could probably figure it out if you have a really big submission and they all use the same serial number and that kind of stuff. But still, like, there's those types of processes should be in place, and they shouldn't be that hard to do. It was actually one of the things I was ranting a bit about this morning to Drew and Mickey, where I'm just like, you know, grading comic books, it's like it's being made to be too difficult. You know, it's pretty easy. You know, like there's logistics because they grade thousands of books. Like there's complex logistics. I give it that. But it's like, you get in the book, you put the serial number on it, you check it for restoration, check if it's complete, you grade it, you slab it, you ship it back to the person. That's it. That is the entire business. I mean, add in things like signatures, like there's little offshoots like signatures or restoration removal or pressing, but it's all just like, it's a pretty simple workflow. Like this is not a complex thing that's being done here, but it's being made to seem like it's super complex, that like these flaws can fall into the process. And I feel like it's a simple process. And if you just follow that simple process, you eliminate these kinds of issues. And it just, I don't know, like hopefully they make changes from that. Collecto 6, I don't want to burn down CGC. Why is litigation the first reaction all the time with these days? So I think this probably isn't the first reaction. I think this is because it's such a serious impact on their business that I am imagining that this is to deter future people from doing this, like extremely large penalties, like whether they're going to try to see if they can go after them criminally. I have no idea. But if you have like these extremely large penalties that really hurt someone, like you're not going to stop everyone. Like obviously crime exists and there's jails and stuff. So penalties don't necessarily stop the crime. But you can deter some people at least, if you have the penalties that are strong enough. Black Crown Comics, I think they could take down that wall a little more by actually putting notes on the graded books. Yeah, if you're talking about grader notes, I don't know if you're talking about the notes on the labels, but I mean, I totally agree. Like, I know in the past, graders notes, like from what CGC has said, graders notes were always just kind of like random. Like they were just communications between the graders. They were not intended to be a detail of the actual grading. Now, CBCS is different. CBCS's graders notes are very detailed. And I think that's great. But for CGC, it hasn't been that way. Now, I will say over the last about 2 years, maybe, I've noticed almost every one of my books, vintage or older, like the vintage or older. Modern, it's like 50-50, but like vintage or older have graders notes. Like, I mean, I have noticed a huge increase in graders notes, and maybe it's because of stuff like this. Maybe there's speculation that something's going on. So I have seen a lot more, but I agree. Everything that is not a 10-0 should have graders notes. Like, just start doing that. I realize it'll take more time. Maybe they got to charge us an extra $1 or $2 per book. I'm fine with that. Like, that is the type of price increase that if you explain that to me, and I know some people would still blow up and lose their minds because that's what people do. But if you came out and said, we are raising our prices across the board by $5 to ensure that we have graders notes in every single book that is not a 10-0, I would be like, do it. You know, I don't care if you're making a bunch of extra money because of that. Do it. You know, like everything that's not a 10-0 should have something, like whether it's like, oh, a little roughness in the corner, like one spine tick here, like whatever it is, do it. You know, I think the comic community at large would be very, very open to something like that. If you said every single book that you grade costs another $5, but we will put graders notes, detailed graders notes on every book that's not a 10-0, I think everybody would be, you know, obviously not everybody. There's always people that complain, but 98% of people would be for that. And I 100% would be. I would be totally fine paying an extra $5 a book to ensure that everyone had detailed graders notes, as long as it wasn't a 10-0. 10-0 shouldn't have any, right? It's perfect. So even though the 10-0, there's that 10-0 Thor from the Silver Age that has fingerprints on the cover, which I don't understand that one. Let's see. How many swapped out slab CGC cases were just sold to unsuspecting buyers as opposed to sending to CGC for reholder? So that's my whole problem with the videos that are showing how to break into the books, or into the slabs, because we don't like, I still didn't see anything in here that details how this person cracked into the books. We don't know if they used a heat gun. We don't know if they used some other process. We don't know if they used a process that was easier or sorry, more showed tampering more, that actually had cracks and that kind of stuff in the case. But now there's a process out there that isn't, that very easily can be hidden from people. And so that's kind of my problem with that, is like, there are some assumptions that were made that this is what this person is doing, and we don't know what this person was doing to get into these cases. So that's why it's like, after those videos now, I don't know, like, there's more risk to people. Then Prince of Cheese, yeah, it took me like 3 months to sell CBCS Batman 4. Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, like, that's what I'm talking about. These things, they take a while. All right, I've fallen behind in comments. I'm going to try to catch up here. And I've seen your comments, virtual reality fitness. I know you don't like CGC. I've seen I know you don't like CGC. But they're not like, I mean, honestly, like, they're not like NFTs. You can crack the book out anytime you want. It's like, just because it's in a case, it's not permanently in there. It's not locked in there forever. I mean, I just saw somebody post on Reddit today, like, about a Fantastic Four 3 that they bought, and they're like, freed it from its prison, that whole thing. And so, like, you can crack the books out and you can read them if you want. Then we got Chris Padilla, off topic, when's the next Heritage Watch Party? Probably that next big signature auction, but I can never do the weekdays. Like, I mean, I work, so so it's always got to be the Saturday. Like, I can do Saturdays, but that's when that big action one, the 8.5 action one, that is actually my video that I released maybe an hour and a half ago. It's about that one, and so that's gonna be a pretty sweet book to see come up for sale, even though I have some problems with it. I talk about it in that video, but that's gonna be a sweet book to see come up for sale. Sorry, I'm trying to play a little bit of catch up here. I fell behind in my comments. So we've got Joshua Rogers. Look at it from the other side of the equation. Look at it from the buyer side of CGC graded comics. The trust is broken. I think you'll see the decline in prices and sales. I mean, like I said, I haven't, I haven't seen the decline. Now, maybe it's not here yet, but I probably watch as many sales as anyone else out there. I doubt there are many people out there that watch as many comic sales as I do. And I'm not seeing that. So it just, like, I know people will, like, they'll want to say that and they think that'll happen, but it's not what I'm seeing, So, I mean, maybe it will, but I haven't seen it yet. Now, I do think that there is a reduction in submissions. I really do think that's probably why they dropped the prices. Then we've got, this is why grading things is dumb. You're paying a premium for some arbitrary number attached to plastic case, not the condition of the book or card. I completely disagree. So grading is not arbitrary. It's a pretty well-established process. I mean, Overstreet was around long before CGC, and they've had their grading standards that are in the back. And while CGC doesn't strictly follow Overstreet, they're relatively close. There are certain things Overstreet allows that CGC doesn't, certain little things like that. But CGC really has become the standard. CGC and more or less CBCS have become the standard for grading. And I mean, yeah, I don't really, I mean, I know it's tough to argue this with somebody who doesn't like, like grading and all that stuff, but it's not an arbitrary number. Like, if you've been grading long enough, you can get your grades pretty close. I think like my last big submission, I had an average where I was off by less than half a grade across like 75 books. Like, you don't do that if it's an arbitrary process. Like, it's a pretty well-defined process. You just have to know how to do it. Let's see. Great news for us DC guys. Almost none of our books are on there was that one random book. It was like the first book on the list. And I looked it up. And it was like a $25 9.8 or something like that. I'm like, why is that one on here? That one made me laugh. I don't know. All right. Trying to catch up here. Uh, the book photography they're doing now is way overdue, but seems to be a good way to help identify shenanigans. They used to offer paid photo service, all the paid photos they took. So yeah, I agree. I actually I thought that might be why they started doing it, was because they thought maybe some stuff was going on. So they added that in for free. And I think that's great, as long as they are checking them when the books come back. If you're actually checking those photos against, or you like take a photo and you have some type of AI comparison and it's like, oh, this doesn't match, like that type of stuff would immediately stop at least this type of scamming. Obviously doesn't stop the scamming if somebody never sends it back in. But yes, I agree. Like they're, and that's the other thing. Like, and I know like people like me or whatever, if I say anything positive about CGC, like I'll get attacked. They're like, oh, you're just trying to pump CGC because you got CGC books behind you on the shelf, and it's like, no, like if they do something good, you should say good job, you know, like if they do something bad, obviously people call it out. They do something good, tell them they did a good job. Like I love that they've added more to graders notes. I love that they added the photos. I mean, I like the decrease in prices. I mean, it's great. Like those things are all positives, but like, so it's like, if they do something good, make sure you tell them they're doing good. And then, yeah, yeah, Mickey, if all YouTubers are dumb. I know this is a response to my prior comment. It's true. I know we don't know what we're doing. All right. I'm going to try it again. There's a lot of comments here, so I'm trying to catch up. And again, thanks everybody for joining the chat. Really proud of you for earning a wrench from Ryan Swag. You've come so far. Yeah. No, it's gotta have somebody to help me when I start getting some crazy comments in the chat. All right. So it's still going down. All right, then we've got consume the living. My issue with all this is how lax CGC is internally, employee level negligence plus inconsistent grading practices. And again, I know people like to point out the outliers, but the grading is actually very consistent. I mean, that's what I've shown just like with my submissions. Like when I get books back, and again, I'm within half a grade every single time. Or, I think I'm off maybe like 1 out of 75. I'm off by like 1, it's like how is that inconsistent? I mean, yeah, I know, like, so like people get real nitpicky around the 9698. And we talked about that with that whole 99 pre-screen thing. And I think that's CGC's fault. It's the whole thing where I feel like they weren't giving books 9.9s or 10s when they should have. A lot of those like brand new off the press books probably should be getting 9.9s and 10s, and they weren't. And so then everybody thinks that's what a 9.8 looks like, but a 9.8 actually can have like some of those flaws. And so I don't think there's little things around those types of grades that, yeah, they definitely some issues there, but for the most part, I think CGC is actually very consistent for the number of books that they grade. And you got to remember that, like, they're grading a lot of books, and I do think that they're very consistent for that. Yeah, they could solve the entire issue with a 4-cent hologram security seal. And that's what I mentioned earlier. Like that's why isn't that like an immediate interim fix? Like some type of hologram seal. And obviously, like I said, you got to check to make sure you can't easily remove it. But yeah, I agree. I totally agree. That should be some type of interim fix. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up here. Okay, we've got, and I see a lot of comments from you in my chat. I know you're a big CBCS fan, Genuine Article Comics. CGC too big to fail? Do you believe there was corporate attitude that they are too big to fail? They own 85% of the market, therefore we don't need to be as diligent. Nobody's too big to fail. Anybody can screw up bad enough that they can fail. But like, honestly, like to me, like the things that have happened, I don't think that's them screwing up bad enough to actually, and that's shown again with the prices. Like the books are still getting the same prices or better. So yes, you could fail if you make a big enough mistake. But one, like the second whole thing was like somebody internally stealing. And as long as you put new protocols in place to prevent that kind of stuff, fine. And the other one was the slabs. And as long as you take that as like a learning thing and you change your slabs, it's good. Like that's the stuff we want. Like the people that think we're going to end slabbing and all this kind of thing, like it's not going away. Like grading we're only getting more grading. Like we're not getting less. Like there's new things that are being added to grading. Like, I mean, like Beckett doing the manga now, and CGC expanding to VHS and video games and pulps, and I'm sure manga's coming down the pike, you know, like all that kind of stuff. Like grading is only going to expand, and so we might as well try to make it as good as possible when it's out there. Let's see here. I looked up CGC pay structures on Glassdoor a month ago. There are people working there making 25K without benefits. Yeah, I mean, sure there are. You know, that's what, like $10 an hour, $12 an hour. I wouldn't be surprised. It all depends. Like, and again, like and I talked about that earlier. Like, it's like, what stuff are they touching? You know, but that can be where that temptation can come from. I mean, like I said, if you've got $500,000 in books passing through your hands per day, and then, you know, you're making 20,000 or 40,000 or 60,000 or whatever, like that temptation is going to be there. We've got Big V McFly, the comic guy here. He is, like, if you haven't checked out his channel, make sure to go check out his channel. He is the guy that I bought a collection with recently that he is shipped out to me yesterday. So I should be getting those soon. We're going to be doing some videos specifically about that, talk about those books. It was mostly Golden Age collection. So that should be super fun. All right. This person asks, how are they making a living stealing comics? Obviously, it's very funny. Prince of Cheese says, I used to work at a Boy Scout shooting range, and there were so many safeguards. I don't believe that CGC can't pretty quickly set up policies and culture that stems the tide of fraud. I agree. That's why I was kind of ranting about earlier, that I'm like, this isn't that complicated. It is a very simple workflow for grading, cleaning, getting signatures, you know, slabbing, shipping. Like, it's a very, very simple workflow. It has complexities because of the volume, like the logistics with the volume, but it can all be handled, you know, like, especially with enough money. And it shouldn't be as difficult as it is, like, kind of like made out to be. All right. So I'm getting close, I feel like, to catching up here. We got complete and detailed grader notes would be great. It would take the mystery out of the grade, but maybe CGC doesn't want that. I think CGC wants people to send in books to get graded. I think that's what CGC wants. And if more detailed graders notes lets people or gets more people to send in books, like that's one of those things. Like, when you think about who their main competition is, like CGC's main competition is CBCS, even though CGC has a vast majority of market share. Like, their main competitor is CBCS. What are the things that CBCS has that CGC doesn't? They have a more tamper evident case. They have no Newton rings. You know, they have graders notes for almost everything. I think it's 9.6 and below for CBCS. I don't remember exactly. And, you know, I think a lot of people say, like, they have clearer cases, you know, that kind of thing. I personally, I don't like the new label. I think it looked out of date the instant it was made. But that's just me. I don't care for the new label, but you know, like, CGC, all they have to do is look at the things that CBCS does better and go, we'll just start doing those things. Then CBCS does nothing better. You know, like, and one of the big things is the detailed graders notes. Start doing that. Then nobody can go like, oh, CBCS has this and we don't. You know, like the Newton rings, that's a whole case design stuff. Like, maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. But the redesign for tamper evident, like, you can address that. But yeah, graders notes, like, that's one of the big things that people will say CBCS does better, and they do. CBCS does do it better. But CGC could do it just as well or better if they wanted to. They could say everything other than a 10.0, you know, because like Matt Nelson said, like, a 9.9 can have a spine tick, and I've seen 9.9s with spine ticks now. I have seen them. I thought I wouldn't be able to find one, but I've seen them. So you can't have spine ticks with a 9.9. CGC PR department must have felt more comfortable with the public knowing that CGC are bringing their employees to court versus dealing with this in-house. I think this issue is much bigger internally. I mean, that's the thing. I'm never going to speculate on things that I don't have facts on. I don't know what goes on inside there, but like, this stuff, we all know. We know what's going on here. All right. Here we've got, how is that 8.5 Action Comics 1 have the same serial number? So I don't know if you watched my video, but that was like, in my video, I got that I put out like an hour and a half ago. I got out my tinfoil hat because I had a huge problem with that. Huge problem with that. Yeah. So yeah, make sure you go check that one out. To me, that's maybe it's them not following their processes or what. But if you're wondering what I'm talking about, there's the 8.5 Action 1 that's going to be coming up for sale, and it has the same serial number as the 8.0 Action 1 that sold 13 or whatever years ago. It's not supposed to happen. From everything I've seen, when you send in a book and it's getting regraded, you get a new serial number. If you're getting recased, if you're just like, if they wanted the new label, keep the serial number. Regraded is a new serial number, new submission, new process, no tie to that old book. So yeah, that I agree. I don't know why that has the same serial number, and I would love to have somebody explain to me in a way that I'm not just going to go like, "Don't lie to me," because I mean, I didn't talk about this in that video because I found it afterwards, but I had a book that I had gotten graded. It was a restored copy of a book, like Captain Battle 3, and it came back restored, and I wanted the restoration removed, so I just sent it back into CGC in the case, and it was a Rockford pedigree, so it was a pedigree too, like same stuff. So pedigree 2 in the case, and when they sent it back to me, new serial number, like it's supposed to, new serial number. So I don't know why that Action 1 has a different or has the same serial number. It shouldn't. It's I don't like it. Let's see here. Yeah, Prince of Cheese. We have many tomes of grading standards published for 50 years or more. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, people will disagree about little things. And there's things that can change over time. Like, I think in Overstreet, you're allowed to swap out period correct staples, but CGC calls that conservation. Overstreet doesn't. Like, there are little differences between some of these, but on average, most of that stuff will get you close. Consuming living, I would say CGC makes enough to actually do their job, which would be provide graders notes. For the current cost per book, CBCS already provides. I mean, but I can see like that's where you're going to complain if they raise their prices, but I'm okay with it. I would say like if that's what you have to do to get these graders notes and everything, raise your prices. You'll make more money. I don't think it's going to hurt your submissions. Maybe it would hurt like a little bit on the modern, like the bulk of those books that go in. It might hurt a little bit there. But I think it would give people a lot more confidence, and you give a lot less ammunition to the critics out there. I just don't understand how you can put so much faith in grading when you can crack a book out, resubmit it 100 times and get a different grade 99 times more than 50 times. It's because grading is close in a lot of times, and you have grade books that can be between grades. You are going to have a little variability. I mean, that's always going to happen when you're going at 0.2s or 0.5s. I mean, it's like I said with that ASM 198, like I think it's probably like a 9.7. And so it comes back 6 times a 9.6 and it comes back 4 times a 9.8. And as long as you understand that, like, fine, like not every book is going to be like an exactly, on the line for a grade. And so you're going to have some variation, but that doesn't mean you don't put faith in the company and what number they put on there. It's just maybe you don't put so much emphasis on like half a grade, like that's why you generally don't have huge price gaps between half grades. It's because they're about the same, they're pretty similar books. Some books you will, some books have these like big jumps at certain grade points, that kind of thing. But and 9.8s are one of those, but yeah, that's why I can still have faith in what they provide. I don't need it to be 100% to be okay with it. Let's see. Have you noticed the vintage tier comics at CGC being delayed since the CGC scandal came out? I haven't submitted anything, so I can't tell you that. I don't know. I usually would do fast track. So maybe I wouldn't notice it. I often do fast track with my submissions, but I haven't submitted anything real recently. Use AI incoming and outgoing to verify the same book. Yeah, that's where, yes, like I said, like if you have pictures of everything, you should be able to check like when that book comes back in, if it's actually the same one. Unfortunately, they started doing that just last year. It's like that only started in approximately May or June of 2023. So you don't have any of that older stuff. So yeah, it's good they're doing it now, but there's still plenty of books out there that are already graded that don't have that. Oh yeah, and CBCS has a signature verification. Yeah, that is one of the things, and I don't think CGC will ever do that. I think it just the witness signatures are just, it's something where you can guarantee what you're getting. Whereas I know there have been a number of instances where people have faked signatures and sent them into or at least one instance, I don't know about plenty, where someone faked signatures, sent them into CBCS and they got verified. So there's that risk there with the verified signature program, whereas there is no risk of that with a, visually confirmed signature. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up again here. We got Bigby here. You would think that anyone leaving the CGC facility would be checked. Yeah, that's one of the things I said earlier. Like, you shouldn't be allowed to bring in or take out any collectible that CGC grades if you work there. Your bag should be checked, and if they find anything, they confiscate it at the door, and you can get it back later. I think when you're, I would assume, like banks and stuff probably have some type of process, or like Fort Knox, like not walking out with gold bars. It's like same type of thing here. Like, I mean, because some of these books are worth more than a gold bar. Like you should be having that type of check whenever somebody's coming in or leaving. And if you do, some of those things shouldn't have happened. CBCS has no purple labels or blue labels, clearly say restored with all defects listed right on the label. Small thing, but much better display in my opinion. Yeah, and I know Steve Borak, when he was on Mickey's channel, he said that he felt like the purple and green labels were a mistake that he made when setting up the, like the grading rules and all this kind of stuff that CGC uses. And obviously they didn't do that with CBCS. I'm a little torn on it. The CBCS one, sometimes you can, like especially when you're on something like Instagram, like a lot of us, if you're buying on Instagram or whatever, like that restored doesn't jump out on the CBCS blue label, and it moves around. Like if you've seen like iterations of those books over the years, sometimes it's up above the grade, sometimes it's below the grade, sometimes it's in like a different spot. And so you have to know where to look and this kind of stuff. Whereas like purple label is purple label, you know what you're getting. So, I mean, I could see it either way. I mean, obviously like I got a purple label up there. So, I've talked about this in a number of like this, like who is foolish enough to be sending in and paying CD. I wouldn't think anything about it. Like if you want to sell your books for the premium value, you send them into CGC, whether this thing is going on or not. It's like, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like they're going to sell for more. So yeah, I'd send them into CGC. Newsstand 99 bought a 9.4, cracked it, resubmitted, got a 9.8. Either the book was originally 9.8 or it was a 9.4 with no consistency. I mean, I don't know what he necessarily did to it. He might have pressed it. There's all kinds of things that can be done there. So I've seen books where people have gotten 7.5s and they can press it and get a 9.8. I mean, look at Ultimate Fallout 4. Like that book all the time. People have that like the bag mark, and they'll get like a 7.5 if you didn't get it pressed first. And then you crack the book out, press it, and you get a 9.8. So yeah, I mean, there can be some variability, like especially at that high end, at the high grade, but usually people are pressing before they're doing a resub like that. If they even hint at raising prices without changing cases or providing notes, I'm not submitting. CGC has the same fancy dancing to win me back. Has to do some fancy dancing to win me back. Yeah, I feel like a price increase should probably come with something, like some type of benefit. And like I said, I think graders notes, that would be a huge plus to add, like guaranteed graders notes, detailed notes, everything other than a 10.0. Let's see. The only thing I think I'm legitimately struggling with is the 9.9 stuff. Am I now more likely to get a 9.8 than I was before? I've been pressing, cleaning, grading a long time and pretty spot on. I think you would be more likely to get a 9.9 than you were before. I think that's at least what I took away from it, was that there were books that were given 9.8s that were actually 9.9s or 10s. Like that was the big question, like with Ultimate Fallout 4, like how are there, what is it, like 5,000 copies graded in a 9.8 and none of them are, or 4,000 or something, and none of them are 9.9s. Like it just seems insane. And so that's when you just go, okay, like maybe they were giving books that were 9.8s, or sorry, books that were 9.9s, 9.8s, just, and it's not a good story, right? It's a bad story because it just basically goes like, we weren't doing our job, and that's what people complain about. They're like, you should have been looking for that in the first place. And I totally agree. Like if that's the case, like that's a really bad story to be telling, but that's kind of what it sounded like. They've raised their prices enough. I mean, honestly, I don't think so. I mean, I know people hate hearing that, but it's like everything else goes up every year. Like, why wouldn't grading go up every year? Like, people's salaries go up, people's pay goes up, cost of plastic, cost of materials, everything goes up every year. It's like people say, like, if you're renting, like you should expect your rent to go up every year. Same thing here. Like, I think the mistake CGC made in the past is they never raised their prices. Like they kept them the same for like 5 years. They should have been raising their price, whether it was by 50 cents or whatever it was, like every year. And they didn't. And I know people will be like, don't give them any ideas, but that's what they should have been doing. And I think people got too comfortable with the price always being the same. Maybe you wouldn't want me as president of CGC because I'd be raising the prices every year. Let's see. Third-party grading system is more granular than Overstreet. Overstreet is not just FN, VF, and NM. You look into the back of there, it's a lot more detailed than that. So that's not all Overstreet is. Like they just break it down, maybe not quite as detailed in the pricing, but they're pretty detailed when you go into the back in their grading standards. Let's see. Sorry, it shifted on me here. Okay, off topic. Very interested in the pulp and manga market, where that will go once slabs start hitting the auction sites. I don't know. I'm not overly interested in pulps or manga. So, I mean, I'm a huge anime fan, but I'm not like a big manga fan. I could see myself maybe buying something with that. But yeah, I think people think it's going to cause the prices to go up a lot. I think with manga, it will. I think it's going to have a big impact in that market. Pulps, I'm less convinced because I think the manga market is actually like going to be huge. I think it's going to be a huge market. I mean, if you talk to anybody about like comic sales today and that kind of stuff and versus manga's huge. It's way bigger. So 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, I think that's going to be one of those big markets. Pulps, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, I think a lot of the people that collect them are not going to be here anymore. So I think that's a declining market. So I'm less convinced on the pulp market. How many purple labels can be cracked and resubmitted and get blues? Very few without doing something. I mean, you can crack them and have the restoration removed and get a blue label. That's what plenty of people do. There are some instances where some people might get away with something, like one of the ones where there's a lot of, I don't know, kind of like consternation around, or whatever you want to call it, is trimming. Trimming can like if it's done correctly or well, and I don't want to say correctly because it's always bad, but if it's done well, trimming can potentially be very, very difficult to spot. I mean, I remember when ETA Nick used to have a channel and he would talk about trimming and he would show books that like neither one were trimmed. You would be like the same book, like right next to each other, like a silver or bronze age book. One of them would be like a 1/4 inch taller than the other. It's like, you can't just like measure a book and say like, oh, that one's trimmed or that one's not. Like the manufacturing processes, especially for these older books, was not tight enough to be able to do that. Modern books, maybe, but those older books you can't. And so it can be a lot more difficult to detect that. And so I could see someone getting a book maybe marked as trimmed and they're like, there's no way this was trimmed, and sending it back in and getting a blue label. I could see that happening, but not a lot of the other stuff. Like, I think they're pretty good at catching like glue, color, touch. They're okay at married stuff. Like married stuff gets through, that kind of thing. Like, but I think they're pretty good at catching most of the other stuff consistently. All right. Lieutenant Dan, yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm just kind of like shooting it randomly now, like based on comments. If you want to see the conversation about the scam, like maybe we'll go back and talk about it more because we've got some more people in the chat now. We talked about that earlier on in the video. Let's see. I just want to try to catch up on comments first. Big B McFly, the comic guy, says not everything is going to sell for more if it's graded. That's definitely true. There are some books that like X-Men 266 is one of them. That book, unless it's like a 9698, that book will sell for more raw than it will graded. It's real weird. There are some books like that are really weird. And there are plenty of books where it's not worth the cost to get it graded. It'll sell for the same, like, and especially when you're talking about like low to mid tier, golden age, silver age books, like that's one of the big things with comics that has happened over probably the last 5, 6 years, is that the prices between graded and raw have come together. And that's what personally I think it should be. And I know a lot of like the raw collectors hate that. Like, but I think that's what it should be. It's crazy that you could send a book in, you buy a book for $100, you send it in, and now it's like $1,000. Like, I had plenty of people like say like, oh man, like I bought like an AF-15 15 years ago for $4,000. And I'm just like, that's insanity. Like, and it came back like a 6.0. It's like 15 years ago, a 6.0 was still a lot more than $4,000. And so there used to be, it was like with cards, like there used to be this huge gap between raw and graded prices with comics, just like there is with cards today. And that has gone away a lot. And so to me now, a lot more of what you get with grading isn't necessarily the value bump. It's the ease of the transaction. Like, I mean, I also like how they look. I mean, I like how they look, but it's the ease of the transaction because people can trust what they're getting and people can generally agree what they're getting. So that's to me what grading really adds. Appears that pre-code horror hasn't been affected by these scams, at least not yet. It hasn't seemed like there's been much golden age. Now I know that I've had people message me and say like, oh, there's people that, like they swap in staples, they do all kinds of stuff and they try to sneak it past CGC. And I mean, you have to realize that stuff is going to happen, but just also know, I think that you suck, that you do that. If you're doing that and your goal is to try to slip it past, I don't like you. So I don't think that's okay. And I've said this before, like, if you think you're like getting one by CGC, in my mind, you're not getting one by CGC. You still paid CGC. They got their money. They did their best to try to get it. Like, if you're like really good at tricking people with that kind of stuff, like you get it by CGC, who you're really screwing is the person who's buying it on the other end. Like that's the problem there. Like, yeah, CGC, maybe they should catch it, but if somebody's like is good enough, like I blame you for being a crappy person that's trying to steal from people. Like, I mean, like me, my Superman 2 came back. CGC missed it was a married cover. You know what I did? Sent it back to CGC. Said, hey, this is a married cover. Like that's what you do. But I think a lot of people, or maybe not a lot, maybe just like some people, like they get that back and think like, oh, I won. Like I don't need to, like, now this is worth more. Now I can sell it for more. I got one past CGC. And I think to me, that's wrong. That's not what you should be doing. Like if you're not, like, you're a thief when you're doing that. I mean, that's what you are. Like, that's all I got to say. Let's see. Trying to catch up a little bit more here. We got, I have a rare Silver Age book in a 9.6. I see no ticks or marks on either cover. Pages are off-white. Grader note says staple rusted, graded 2009. Any chance to get a 9.8? Probably not. Like, it could be like, there can be very small amounts of staple rust that you can still get those types of high grades, but probably not. I would probably be like happy with your 9.6. Let's see. I wonder how much comic book price increases trending over the last 10 to 15 years is due to graded versus raw prices slowly growing closer. I don't know. I mean, that's all, again, I can't say for sure. I think a big part of it has been, I mean, the MCU definitely played a role, like you can't deny that. Like, it's gotten a lot more people's attention. And yeah, I mean, even like me, like I don't know why I got back into comics exactly, but like 5 years ago, I decided I know why. Like, my brother brought me my childhood comics and I, got back into it, and I was like, oh, these are cool. I can go buy some comics. But I don't know like what really caused me to like full blown go into it. But like, I mean, sometimes that stuff just happens. Like, you get more people in the market and then prices go up because there's more people buying. That's definitely what happened during the comic boom. But all right. Let's see. Yeah, you can clean staple rust, but if they think you cleaned it, you're going to get a conserved label. So you got, like, that's one of those things. Like, I guess you take that risk. But all right, let's just, because it's been a little while, and then we'll go back. We'll recap on this whole thing for anybody that's new into the chat. So I think a lot of people, they probably heard that maybe, what was it, a few days ago, we had the lawsuit that came out versus, CGC or CCG, who owns CGC, versus the Terrazas. And this was the insider scam thing where people were stealing books that worked in CGC. And so this was a surprise. I don't think nobody expected this case, at least. Like some people will say, like I said earlier, like, oh, I knew this was happening, that's kind of stuff. But this was more of a surprise. Then on February 2nd, but people just started talking about this from what I heard late last night. That's when I heard about it. We had this case, which was CGC versus Zanello et al. So it's Ulysses Zanello and Bree Riva. And this is the Reholder scam. And so if you've, I talked about this earlier, but if this Bree Riva, one of the eBay accounts that was identified as selling those books was B Riva 3. And they actually talk about that in the actual, the complaint, that was submitted. And so this is the whole Reholder thing. Like this is now we actually have the real scam. This is the one that everybody's been talking about that's blown up everything. That is this. And so Mickey made a video about this and kind of going over the different filings late last night, if you want to go check that out. But what came out today was we had this guy, Paul Lesko, who is like a lawyer who often speaks on collectibles issues. And he was the one that a lot of us, when we were talking about the theft scam, it was his recap that we were going over. And so he did a recap here now of this new one. And so if we just kind of we won't have to go into necessarily the nitty gritty details. But you can see in the new lawsuit, CGC is taking on Ulysses Zanello and Bree Riva, who allegedly engaged in what they advertised as CGC certified comic books in CGC holders, but in reality were swapped for interior lower value comics. This is that whole scam. And they go into the details here, and they talk about, for example, some of the eBay accounts. These are what people had been openly talking about, but not all of them. The only ones I had heard were Comic Selects and Briva 3. But there was also Corner 152, Elysium 140, Corner 142, Elysium 142, Zangalore, which I think was the account on Instagram. If I remember correctly, that was the name on Instagram, and Oraleg, whatever, how you ever pronounce that. And then you also had the Bree Riva owned the Comic Selects and B Riva 3. So if you've ever bought books from those accounts, it's possible that you bought a compromised book. So, if you want to come and check this out, come to Paul Lesko's Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, and, look those up, and you can look into that yourself, maybe the history of what you've purchased. Then it goes into how many books were actually impacted. And this is something that we all were interested in. Now, I think at least on the CGC forums, people have been saying this is a lot of books, more than the 350 that CGC had mentioned, but that was just the number of books that this person had either submitted or sold. And so here it says that they submitted 2,000 plus comic books. So definitely a lot more than the 350, but we don't actually know how many of those are compromised. A lot of them, or most of them, are probably fine. But they said 369 of those 2,000 were reholders. And that's where that whole 350 number came from. That's where that all comes from, is it's the reholders. And so that's what we were all kind of speculating, that they were just focused on the reholders, but we didn't know for sure. And this kind of gives us a little more confidence about that. They also say that they seem to have ramped up their submissions in the last few years. So, maybe that tells us they were legit dealers up until, 2020 or 2021. And then all of a sudden they found this flaw that they could take advantage of, and they started doing this. I don't know. I have no idea. But it was, in 2021, it was 253 submissions. 2022 was 345. 2023 was 329. So a lot more submissions. And there probably would have been more in 2023, maybe if they hadn't gotten caught at the end of the year. Then he says the total aggregate value, and this is on the thumbnail that I made, was $4 million. And now this was based on the value that they put in for the book when they submitted it for reholdering or for grading. And so in reality, that value could be way higher than $4 million. A lot of people, you don't put in the actual, you think the final resale value for the book. You might put in a lower value so it gets in a lower tier or whatever it is. And if you're resubbing or reslabbing, maybe you don't want to pay the $50 reslab fee. You want to pay the $20 reslab fee. So you put it's under $1,000 when it's actually over $1,000, all that kind of stuff. So I would say at least $4 million, maybe a lot more than $4 million. So you can tell right there, regardless, this is a way bigger deal than the theft scam. The other thing is the theft one, you fire those people, it's resolved. You get people's money back, whatever. But that one, they were talking about like $26,000 in sales, 4 million. This is not a small number. Then it says they discovered it around December 21st. That was when 99 Newsstand came out with, his finding on that Amazing Spider-Man 252 Mark Jewelers. And that's when this whole investigation, everything started. So then they show a few of the books, they show Hulk 340. And these are the ones, like, if you had been following this whole thing, like these are some of the common books that we saw: Hulk 340, Amazing Spider-Man 252, New Mutants 98. And basically, they're suing them for damaging their name, because that's really what it is. Like, it's like, how much has this damaged their name? Are they, are people submitting less books now because of it? I mean, I know, like, I have a bunch of books I was planning on submitting. I'm just holding off right now. And I don't know. I mean, I might, it all depends how long it's going to be till this thing gets fixed. Like, I might just finally start sending stuff in again if it seems like it's going to be a year or 2 years. But at least for now, I'm holding off. I know I remember Gary said on when he was on Pressable Defects, like, he was holding off sending stuff in. So we'd like to see some type of, some change there, whether it's a new case or what. And we talked about this earlier in the video, like other mitigations, like interim steps, like some type of hollow seal, like sticker on the edge or on the corners or whatever, like something that doesn't require a whole new slabbing machine, like casing machine, but they could do as a step afterwards, like that kind of thing. Like, what can you do there to address this? But yeah, I mean, he goes into, just again, like all the details here. It says, CGC alleges the defendant recently became aware that their fraudulent scheme was unraveling. So Zanello called CGC to attempt to recover 3 books that the defendant had recently submitted. So he's trying to get some of the evidence back, all this kind of stuff. CGC has already confirmed that a number of comic books submitted by defendants for reholdering have been swapped, and that it's reviewing hundreds of other comic books submitted by defendants, and expects to find that many of these were also swapped. So that means maybe there's more. That's something we didn't talk about actually earlier. This sounds like maybe I think that was a question we were all wondering, like, was that 350 book list going to grow? And it didn't really seem like it when we talked about it with the original conversation with Matt Nelson on West Coast Avengers. But this seems like maybe it is. Maybe that list is going to grow. So we'll have to see. Just keep watching and see what other news we get. Since mid-December, CGC has received multiple inquiries from individual comic book collectors and consignment businesses who believe defendants duped them. So, yeah, I mean, it's just all of this. It sucks. Like, I mean, I think we all know that. Like, it all sucks. Nobody wants this. Like, nobody wants the theft. Nobody wants the scamming. But this stuff is, it's going to happen. Whenever there's money involved, and there can be big money in comics. I mean, you saw that, like that Mark Jewelers 98 newsstand sold for $15,700. I mean, there's big money in this if people are willing to take that risk. And so you have to put controls in place to try and protect from that. And we talked about that earlier, some other things they could do, maybe CGC needs to hire some new people, like, to put in positions where they're actually, like, their job is to find this stuff. Their job is to try and prevent this. And you would hope that those positions are there already. But given the fact that this stuff happened, they either aren't there, or they aren't funded well enough, or there aren't enough people there to actually do the job that needs to be done. And so, again, hopefully all this stuff ends up improving the processes there. I don't know what Comic Boss One is talking about. I know you're always on my channel posting negative stuff, so I mean, I'll take whatever you say with a grain of salt, honestly. But you said you're holding off. You told us you weren't. Why were we laughed at when you said we didn't trust CGC? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. But I said it a while ago that I was holding off on my submissions. That's why I haven't sent anything in. But I also said I'll probably at some point start sending them in. Like, if they aren't going to do new cases. I mean, like I said, I also am in addition to a collector, I'm a business, and I submit books to CGC for grading as part of my business. So if they aren't going to update their cases, eventually I'm just going to start sending in books again. But yeah, I know. I mean, I've seen enough of your comments to know where you stand. So So yeah, I don't need to speak to that one too much more. And Prince of Cheese, I'm just still sending stuff in. I mean, yeah, I mean, I know, and plenty of people are. And I've said it before, like I don't hold anything against anybody for sending stuff in. I'm just kind of waiting to see if we're going to get some type of new case or new process or whatever. Let's see. If you were to take a random sample of 100 slabs from across the country, most times all 100 will be legitimate. The vast majority of slabs are fine. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. I mean, out of the 10 million slabs, most are fine. The problem comes up, and we talked about this when the whole scam broke and the list of books came out. It's when the percentage of books in that grade can start to be impacted. So like the 9.8 Amazing Spider-Man 194s, like it's a huge percentage of it was like 10% or 12% were this person's reholder submissions of the 9.8s. So it's like those are actually measurable. But not this, like, but not the average book, not most books. Just got here. Did you talk about the comic link connection? I did not. I saw a little, like I hadn't, before I started this whole thing, I decided to go live instead of filming a video. I decided to go live and try to go through this. I hadn't checked the comic link connection, but this says comic link right here. Let's talk about that. So since mid-December, here we go. Where did I see? I saw comic link here. In addition, on or about December 30th, 2023, CGC became aware that a large and well-respected comic book auction firm, Comic Link, was in possession of a number of potentially swapped comic books in CGC holders consigned to them by defendants. Because Comic Link believed they had received legitimate high-value comic books certified by CGC, Comic Link advanced Zanello tens of thousands of dollars for the comic books. Yikes. Also, CGC became aware. In addition, oh, okay, that's where he's zooming in on this little part here. So I guess that's the Comic Link connection. Yeah, I don't know if they got their money back or what, how that all worked, but that sucks. Yeah, I mean, so again, I mean, I think this covers everything pretty much. Oh, here we go. So that's not it. So let's see. All right, let's see what else is here. Sorry, like I said, I'm scrolling through here, but that's not it, because CGC also brings a motion for temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction against the defendants too, as they say in the biz. I'm not going to say the word, shut that down now, as well as to get documents and materials from defendants ASAP. For the injunction, CGC wants the defendants to stop using CGC's trademarks in any manner whatsoever, as well as to not hide, destroy, alter evidence in the case. For the expected discovery, CGC wants bunches of info and material within 14 days, as well as including defendants' complete sales records for any counterfeit reholdered books. So that's about it. It says busy week for CGC. It's only going to get busier since it's seeking TROs in both this and the Traz's case. So maybe we'll get 2 hearings and 2 orders next week to talk about as well. So yeah, make sure you follow Paul Lesko on Twitter. You'll get all kinds of interesting updates about this. And yeah, that's a question. Are we going to get more? Are more scams are going to be found, or is this the extent of it and all that? Nobody really knows. I mean, I know plenty of people think like there's all kinds of other things going on out there, and maybe there are, but I don't know. And if you have proof about it, don't just, scream speculation and actually show it. But if you don't have proof, I mean, come on, like let it rest until actual proof comes out or until you get proof. But let's see. Although I'll finish off with some of the comments here. Although sometimes the defendants allegedly skipped the 4th step, reholdering, and just sold the swap comic books to consumers in the original CGC holder. So any book they handled, period. So where's that one? Did I miss because yeah, that's what I'm trying to go through these. So let's see. Skip the 4th step. Individual comic book collectors. So a number of comic books submitted by defendants. I didn't see that one in here, but maybe it's inside one of these. Like he didn't call that out specifically, but maybe it's inside one of these. And I don't want to, I don't think watching me read documents is necessarily the most exciting part. Oh, here we go. You did call it out. All right. Although sometimes the defendants allegedly skipped the fourth step, which was submitted the lower value copy to CGC for reholdering and just sold the swap comic books to the consumers in the original holder. So that's where the yeah, that good. Thanks a lot, Major Strange. Thanks for pointing that one out. I did not see that. So yeah, that's the fear, right? That out of the 2,000 books, that means it's not just reholders. And I know like Keep It Thorough had been doing some videos on this for a while, and he had shown some books that people that he knows had sent him that he was pretty sure were probably trimmed and that kind of thing, and they hadn't been reholdered. And so that could possibly be the case here. You know, the people that had bought from this person. And so that could possibly be the case here. Like some of these books that they had sold without sending back in through reholdering. And that's what brings the entire 2,000 books into question, and probably why the full 2,000 book list should be published and dealt with that way. And, you know, if this person sold all these books, this person probably has, you know, they have the money to go after them and take that money and repay the people that got robbed. Right. So, but yeah, thanks for calling that out. I did not catch that. I mean, CGC isn't some like, so this comment here, like there needs to be oversight and it can't be internal. They're a private company. Like there's no oversight committee for comic grading. So, I mean, we could say that, but I don't think that's ever going to happen personally. Let's see. I bet they use the comic link advances to get more legit 9/8s too. They might have, you know, who knows? But all right, Ben, I was planning on this being super short. You know, it's Sunday. I got stuff to do. I gotta go wash the car. It's snowed here. Got salt and everything like that. So, but appreciate everybody joining. This has been really interesting to see how this has all turned out. It'll be interesting to follow moving forward. Again, like I said, make sure if you want, you know, this information as it comes up, go follow Paul Lesko on X or on Twitter. So weird. Like it's still on the, you know, it's still called Twitter on the URL. So, but whatever, you know, like go follow X or Paul Lesko on X. And yeah, you'll be able to get those updates right away when this, you know, when this stuff happens. But yeah, hopefully everybody has a good rest of their Sunday, and hopefully the next, you know, like go check out my other video that's out there, and hopefully the, you know, maybe the next videos are a little more positive, not so much negativity going on.